TPA presents Podcasting in 2024, Trends, Insights, and Future Directions with Sounds Profitable. I'm Christy Mirabal, the chair of the Podcast Academy and marketing consultant at the Listening Party Agency. I'm excited to dig into what's shaping the future of podcasting. Joining the Podcast Academy is the incomparable Tom Webster, partner at Sounds Profitable and one of the most respected voices in the audio space. With over 25 years of expertise, Tom has pioneered industry-defining research like the Infinite Dial and Edison podcast metrics, shaping how we understand this wonderful medium of ours. We are going to explore key trends, insights, and the opportunities that lie ahead for podcasting. This is an informal chat, so we definitely encourage questions, but please use the Q&A box so that we are able to kind of sort things through things equally and easily, and do not use the chat box. So feel free to use that and chat amongst yourselves. That's great. And then again, for non-members, stay tuned at the end for a discount code to become a member of the Podcast Academy. So with that, Tom, I'll kind of shoot it over to you. I think you're muted, Tom.
You know, I'm new at this, and yeah, we're going to muddle through. Do join the Podcast Academy if you haven't. I mean, it's really important for us to showcase the best of what we do. I think that's something I've been talking about, I think, and writing about a lot lately is just how do we get more visibility for the space, and the Podcast Academy is a very important part of that. So I'm hoping that you have questions today. Normally I just show a bunch of slides and tell some bad jokes. I may still tell some bad jokes. But I do want to talk a little bit about where the industry is going. And I say industry here because it's not necessarily where creators are going or where podcasters are going or even where you are going. And I think it's important to make that distinction because you get to make your art. You get to make your own choices, right? So this isn't necessarily anything prescriptive, but as far as where things are going in the advertising supported world, there's a couple of trends I think that are germane for next year. I mean, they're already happening now, but the first is that the space has trifurcated, I think, into three domains, right? When this started, when I started, everything was about open RSS, and open RSS is still integral to what we do. It's extraordinarily important and incredibly powerful to be able to set up shop in a podcast client with just one file and everything's there. I think I wrote this this week. It's a little bit of magic, but the space is now really in three buckets, three fairly separate buckets, right? There's the open RSS bucket, there's the YouTube bucket, and then there's the Spotify bucket. And with Spotify for creators, if you're a video creator and you're eligible for that, then that's really kind of its own dog, right? And on the one hand, I think that's exciting. I think that's certainly where the audience is going. Doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be a video podcaster all of a sudden, but I think you're cutting yourself a little bit short by not taking advantage of being on YouTube somehow, because that's kind of where the people are. And I think as a result of all of that, though, I worry a bit. And I'm not I'm not a strict traditionalist. You can take RSS out of my cold dead hands. And in no way do I define podcasting as a technical specification, right? But what I do worry about is that we aren't selling the magic of audio. And that's really what I would love to see anybody on this webinar today. If you're a podcaster, talk about audio with your listeners. Talk about the magic of audio. Talk about how audio can accompany you wherever you go and be a companion, and that you can listen to your favorite shows while you're doing other things like drive or operate on somebody. I don't know. But really talk about the magic of audio, because as the space continues to get messier and messier, I think it's important that podcasting own what it does, right? That own what is the great magic of podcasting. And that's primarily audio, right? I mean, there can be a picture, you're looking at one now, But it's audio forward and audio first, and that's the magic of it, I think. So I think we need to talk about that. And I think, we need the stars of podcasting to talk about that. We need the stars of podcasting to come out and represent for this medium. So that trend, I think, is just going to continue to accelerate. And I do know from the work that we have done that the audience knows very well what a podcast is and isn't. I think they don't mistake a Mr. Beast video for a podcast. I think to most people, a podcast is a talk show, and they can watch that talk show or they can listen to that talk show, and often they do both depending on their situation. But I do think that we need to continue to hammer home the audio forward, the audio benefits of podcasting, to keep it special. And I think that you're certainly going to hear me talk about that a lot in the next year. And then another, I think, second industry trend that's happening that I also kind of have mixed feelings about, but again, it's I don't make the trends. Is that podcasting on the industry side is increasingly going after the dollars that you might get from influencer marketing. And it's kind of being lumped in as influencer marketing. And it's one of my dogs is having a dream in the background. I have two retired racing greyhounds, and they sleep about 20 hours a day, and they chase rabbits in their dreams, and you can hear them. You can hear them now. But I think influencer dollars are legion. There's a lot more money in influencer marketing than there is currently in the podcast space. I have mixed feelings about it. Again, influencer marketing is difficult to. I think the nature of a podcast and podcast advertising is incredibly valuable. And I think it gets watered down a little bit if it's lumped in with everything else that an influencer is doing. That said, get the money. However we get the money, we need the money. But I do have some sort of mixed feelings about it. But both of those facts taken together, I think, spell a muddier space than it used to be, and it's a bigger space. And again, if you're an individual creator, none of this really may mean anything to you. You can still, make your show, make your art, right? I would never discourage anyone from doing that. But the space is a little bit messier now. So I think you have to be honest about that. So it's just getting kind of weird out there. I'm going to take a question. I see a question has come in. Oh, I see some more questions have come in. Okay, awesome. John asks, is there anything we can learn from the shift from radio to films to TV? It seems like there's a clear distinction between these mediums, regardless of delivery technology. A TV show played in the theater isn't the movie, for example. Was there similar confusion back then? Or as my dad would say, I grew up in Maine, if a cat had kittens in the oven, that wouldn't make him biscuits. It means something. I'm sure it does. And I think radio is still incredibly powerful. And radio has declined, especially on the young end over the past, really 15 years. I think spot loads are really crushing it. I hope that's a lesson that we learn. But I do think that it's to get sort of to the heart of your question, John. I think a podcast has to work as an audio form, right? If it's not working as an audio form, then I think that's really clear, right? So it's got to be audio first. It's got to be audio forward, even if it's on YouTube or on Spotify as a video, right? And I don't know about confusion necessarily. I think we've never really defined what a podcast is for the public at large, and I think they've just kind of figured it out. So it does leave some room. It does leave some confusion. But ultimately, I don't think the listener is confused. I really don't. I think they kind of get what a podcast is. I think we can talk more about the benefits of it. We have not had the benefit of the kind of media campaigns that cable television had early on. Cable did a lot to promote itself. I don't think we've gotten together as an industry to really kind of match that, right? Podcasting's never had that kind of a campaign. but I do think it's something that the individual podcaster themselves can talk about. I think, as I said before, I think if you are a podcaster, I think you should talk loud and proud about why podcasts are great and what makes podcasts different. And I think that, that helps to kind of ease that confusion, right? And I think, to a lot of people, it is radio. We can bristle at that, but it's on demand radio for a lot of people. So, and to me, I think that's something to lean into rather than lean away from. So I'm gonna call that one half answered, John. What do you think is the biggest barrier to podcasters using video? It's a time and treasure, right? I mean, most podcasters are, it's not their day job, right? So it does cost a lot, I think. But the one good thing about this, and we did a study last year called Sound You Can See, and it doesn't take much for people to gravitate to a podcast that does have a video component. They just need to see a microphone, right? They need to see a microphone, a studio. It doesn't have to be anything too elaborate. The most important thing to get right for a video is the audio. People will not tolerate poor quality audio. But the time and treasure and equipment part of it, I don't think has to be all that complex. So I think that's, it makes it difficult if you do a scripted format, right? If you're audio fiction or drama, that's a whole different thing. But that said, I went to a live event of the White Vault, which is a fiction podcast, and they had an event here in Boston a few years ago, and it was riveting to watch them do it. The voice actors, the sound, and all of that, and like I would just watch that. So I mean, I think it doesn't have to be elaborate. I think people just like to see who's talking. It helps them track. It helps them pay more attention. So I'm going to say that's answered. um, is there a trend or technology that podcasters should be very excited about and taking advantage of? I, you know, I'm not quite going to answer that. I apologize, anonymous attendee. What I would love to see, I've talked a lot. I've probably talked too much in the last year about YouTube and video, but ultimately, it's not so much. It's somewhat about video, but it's also about the quality of the app. And YouTube, the app, is really easy to use. It's really engaging. It's really easy to find content. It's really easy to share content. You don't need an account. You can just, you're probably going to find what you search for. It's very easy to engage with other people. It's easy to engage with the creators. And there are a lot of compelling features about the app. I would love to see more innovation with audio podcast apps because they are lonely places. And I think a big part of why people gravitate towards YouTube for podcasts is that it's just a better app experience. And there are people working on additions to the RSS spec, the podcasting 2.0, features for monetization and things like that. And RSS has always been able to carry video. But I don't think that there has been as much innovation that is audience based. So that's where I would love to see, and it may be a lost leader for the industry. I don't know, but we need better apps. I think we need better experiences for people that are they're trying to find content, get content recommended for them, and to be able to engage with people. So that's what I would love to see happen. As far as the trends or technology, I mean, there's so much great new tech out right now. I don't really want to endorse anything, but it's never been easier to produce a live show, if that's something that you want to do. And live shows are still relevant, I think. So I'm going to call that one half answered. Christy, anything that you want to ask, or I feel like I'm just rambling here.
No, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was short form video, right? Just to
Yeah.
aid discovery, and video is internet gold. So I would just say in terms of trends, short form video travels on almost every single, social platform, including YouTube. And it's incredibly important in defeating that discovery mechanism that Tom just referenced, that YouTube is kind of famous for. So yeah, that's a big one for all of us.
Let's see here. I want to start a podcast, but want to make sure I'm profitable early. What's one thing now I can do to prepare myself for advertisers? Um, you, I don't think you can do that. I think you can prepare to be profitable early if you already have a significant audience and you hope to migrate that audience to the podcast. Maybe. Um, it's really hard to plan that way. I think you have to make your art first. I you know I it really I think there's an awful lot of focus. And yes, I know I work for a company called Sounds Profitable, and my focus is the industry and making money. But I don't think you can start a podcast that way. You have to start with a show, and you have to start by making your art and trying to tweak it and build an audience and be responsive to an audience. Um, because that's what has to come first. And it's really hard to make money in podcasting. It's uh there are ways to do it. But to get sort of easy access to the advertising market, you have to start with tens of thousands of downloads per episode, at least, right, before you can really access the ad market at large. But that said, I'm a big believer in local, and if there's something you can do with a local merchant or a local company, I think that's an easier start. So, but make your art. Um, the money may or may not come. There's nothing you can do up front to make money. You've got to make your show. You've got to make your art. So there we go. Um, let's see here. How can public radio stations better utilize podcasting to advance their public mission? That's a really good question. That's a whole show. That is a whole show. Um, it's funny. I did used to work in radio a long time ago, and radio has always had this sort of public affairs requirement. And well, I'm not sure what the requirement is now, but in the brief period of time that I was on the radio, there used to be all of this content that was like confined to Sunday morning at 5 a.m. that would like town meetings and stuff like that. I think that's awesome content, and I think that there's always an audience for that content, and so much public radio is not necessarily local, that I think anything you can do to leave deeper footprints in a community is going to continue to keep you relevant. And you look at the radio stations in a given market. They're 80% of them are music, so that's content that they don't own. That's content that's not special or exclusive. And then you have some talk stations, and a lot of what's on those talk stations is syndicated, right? It's not generated locally. So I think anything that you can do to leave deeper footprints in your community will continue to keep you relevant, continue to keep radio relevant. And I think that's true for podcasters as well. So do you feel having video audience that is bigger than your audio audience is good or bad or neutral? Um, I I think it's great to have two audiences. I don't I don't feel one way about it or the other. I mean, to me, it's just about how many Coke machines can you distribute your Coke in, and I don't really care which one is bigger. It doesn't make me feel. It wouldn't make me feel bad if my video audience were larger or smaller than my audio audience. So, what are your thoughts on people saying the podcast space is oversaturated? There are over 2 million books published in the United States every year. I don't think the book market is dead or oversaturated. I think we need to give ourselves a break on that. And people always talk about the number of podcasts, but there aren't really that many active podcasts compared to active humans on the planet, right? I've never really gotten the sort of drive to count how many podcasts there are, 4 million, 5 million or whatever. We don't count TV shows or movies that way. We look at what's coming out this year or what's active, right? I don't think we are far from peak podcast. I'll just say that. Let's see here. What else can I answer? How should we use AI for good? And how much of a threat is Notebook LM to the podcast industry? Notebook LM is a demo, right? I mean, it sort of creates the same sounding podcast over and over. So I'm not so much worried about that. I think it will. I love AI tools. I use them all the time. But I always start with my own original content. I don't ask AI to craft content for me. I'll write something original, and then I may ask AI to do some things with it to save myself a little bit of time. But I will say one thing that excites me about AI tools is innovation in advertising. And again, advertising is kind of my day job. It drives me up a wall when I hear the same spot over and over and over again, especially when it's a host read spot. I think it sticks out even worse when it's a host read spot that is dynamically inserted and just reused over and over and over again. And if AI tools enable us to refresh creative, I think that's a fine use of it. So I'm not afraid of it whatsoever. Don asks, this is a question for you, Christy. Christy mentioned short form video. How are you defining short form video in the context of podcasting?
So every platform has its own special sauce in terms of what counts as short form video, and they're often changing it. And sometimes, honestly, they're all chasing each other. So if somebody makes like longer videos, then all of a sudden the other one will make them longer as well. I can certainly send some specs. If you email me, I'm just at christymirabal at gmail.com. I'm happy to send you some specs, but it's generally anything under like 3 minutes. And I think the challenge is you don't, and Tom was saying this before, it's not like people expect highly produced, video. Like something like this can actually be incredibly compelling from the right creator, but just make sure that you're telling your message, that it's compelling, using the value props and the praises of your show. And do it often, right? Like this is not a thing where, let's say you're launching a new show and you put out like 3 videos and you're like, whoop, I checked that box for short form video. This is a way to constantly reconnect to your audience and talk about specific episodes or guests or things that you're thinking about or feedback from your audience, right? Like that's not it. To Tom's point about the podcast apps being kind of a quiet space, short form video and where it lives allows you to actually have that back and forth with your audience, including actually even augmenting listener surveys, right? So like I said, it kind of changes depending on the platform, and then they themselves change almost every single year, but anything under 3 minutes I would kind of count as short form.
Awesome. Here's a question from Alana. As celebrity hosted podcasts continue to rise, we see how they blow up and grow from their already built-in followers and fans. What are some ways we as independent creators, most of us with limited budgets, can compete with that? Well, I mean, the first is to recognize that you probably can't, unless, already be famous, I guess. That said, I do think that the best advice I can ever imagine giving somebody in podcasting is to make a podcast for a very specific person, and talk to that one person, and get as weird and as specific and as detailed as you can about that one person. And it's not you. I don't know who it is, but make a person up, and make a show for that one person. And I think your show has a much better chance of succeeding if it maintains a very specific, unique viewpoint, a very, as weird a perspective as you can, and that you're addressing that show to that singular one person. Celebrity is fleeting, and it's not easy to compete. And I would love it if the celebrities that are currently making money from podcasting, I would love it if they promoted podcasting more. I would love it if they talked about podcasting more. I would love it if they showed up for us. So, that's something that I certainly talk to our partners about, people who publish some of those shows. I would love to see celebrities come out for the medium a little bit more. But, ultimately, you have to make a show for one person and make the best show for that one person that you can. And that's the key to growing an audience. I'm going to say that was sort of answered. Let's see here. What changes do you see that could affect the way podcasters should go about growing their shows? Well, I want to go back to local here again, because social media is very. I don't know that social media has ever been incredibly effective. I think if people who already have large social media followings, maybe it's effective for them. I don't necessarily think it drives action all that much. Um, but I'm a big fan of local, and I'm a big fan of promoting your show locally. Even if that's in the real world with flyers and billboards and things like that. If you get 100 listeners that way, I don't care if they all came from your hometown or not. Right? It's 100 new listeners, and they can tell friends, and that's, I think, how you grow a show. But I think it's going to be increasingly difficult to grow shows with social media. I do think YouTube is taking some steps to try to highlight new shows and new creators, which is great. But I think we need to do more in the offline world. I'll just leave it at that. Let's see here. I know I've got to go here in a few minutes, Christy, but anything that you want to ask or answer?
I did see one in the chat box. Sorry, let's see. What do you think are the top 5 things every podcaster should do to market and grow their audience? Which I'm also happy to give a hot take on that one too.
Well, give your hot take. Let's hear it.
Yeah, which is not every podcaster is going to have the same 5 things to grow their audience, right? Like the thing that always kind of drives me nuts, I think, as a person who eats, breathes, sleeps podcast marketing is I'll get asked questions like, should I be on TikTok? And you're starting from the wrong place when you get that question, right? Like you really need to start from the place of what is my audience? What is that one person that Tom just mentioned that I'm talking, you're creating that show for? And what are they doing? Where are they living? And where can you kind of put yourself in front of them and their life in a way that is exciting and that hits. And so because of that, if you start with like the more strategy instead of going to like the tactics, the same 5 things are not going to work for people at all, right? Even down till we were just talking about like celebrity led podcasts versus somebody who doesn't have a platform that's growing on their own, right? The 5 things that the celebrity is going to do is going to be completely different than the person that's starting something on their own, right? So it's hard to answer that other than, I will tell you there's a little bit of a truism in terms of like preaching to the converted is a little easier than preaching to the non-converted, but the bigger the medium gets, over the years and the more people that understand podcasting, even that's not as solid as it used to be either, right? People are very much more aware of the medium than they were 5 years ago. So yeah, Tom, I don't know if you agree with me or if you want to argue.
No, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. I think that's a fine answer. I think that is a fine answer. All right, I've got time for one more quick question, so I'll take the one Michael just asked. How do we continue to make advertising a worthwhile monetization tool for podcasters in a walled garden ecosystem? Baked in. I mean, that's the one thing that we can continue to own is our baked in ads. And I think, as far as I know, we can still use baked in ads on Spotify. We can use them on YouTube. And that's really, I think, the secret sauce of podcasting in a lot of ways. But as I mentioned, it's, podcasting has really trifurcated. It's kind of 3 separate spaces now. And like the Red Queen and Alice in Wonderland, we have to keep running just to keep up. So, that's it on my end, I think. Christy, anything else from you?
No, although Nancy, do you want to pop back on or remind me of the promo code? One thing we did want to offer is folks that are not members today, we have a promo code for you for 50% off. And the reason to join is actually we are knee deep in Ambi season. So we just got done with the submission process and the next part is the listening, which is always super fun for those of us that join the Blue Ribbon panel. So there's 2 phases and you are welcome as a member to kind of participate in both, which is the Blue Ribbon panel listening process, which happens, actually, I think it's starting to happen this week. And then early next year, everybody who's a member in the Podcast Academy also gets to vote for the award submissions themselves. And then the AMBs are in March. So it's a really great time to join. And Nancy, what is that promo code?
You want to use promo code TOM24, and that will get you 50% off your first membership with TPA. So we hope that you all join us.
Great. Well, then I think we're all set for today. Again, thank you so much, Tom, for coming and spending some time with us and answering the big meaty questions that we just threw at you. And thanks everybody for joining us. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.